On the 21st of March each year, we celebrate Human Rights Day in South Africa. Did you know that all around the world, Human Rights Day is celebrated on the 10th of December? Only in South Africa is it celebrated on the 21st of March. Why do we celebrate on a different day in South Africa? And why on the 10th of December for the rest of the world? Let's go back in time to 1948. What was life like back then? In 1948, the Second World War had recently finished, but there were still many countries at war and in conflict around the world. Slavery systems were still in place around the world, even though slavery was officially meant to have been abolished or stopped. Discrimination and racism was common. People were treated unfairly because of their skin color or their gender. They were not treated equally, and there was no overall law to say this was wrong. There was a lot of violence in the world, which went unpunished if those in power believed they were justified in their violence. A lot of violence was linked to people being treated unfairly because of a darker skin color or because they were women or children. Education was limited. Not everyone had access to education, especially if they were poor. In some places, education was not given to girls or to people of darker skin colours, or a lesser education was given. Wrongful arrests would occur, where people could be arrested just because of their opinions or views without having done anything wrong. As you can imagine, there were many unhappy and angry people who protested about the way they were treated. In 1948, the United Nations, which is an international organization representing 193 countries, came together and worked on a legal agreement that states the rights that everyone has because they are human. On the 10th of December 1948, the Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. There are 30 human rights in the Declaration. Let's look at what some of these human rights are. Free and equal. All human beings are born free and equal and should be treated equally, regardless of their race, gender, or age. No one is of less value than anyone else. The right to life. Everyone has the right to life and to live in freedom and safety. Freedom from slavery. No one has the right to treat anyone as a slave in any way. Equality before the law and access to justice. The law is the same for everyone and should be applied to everyone in the same way. You have the right to get legal help and access the justice system if your rights are disrespected. The right to marry and found a family. Everyone has the right to marry when they are legally old enough and can choose who they marry and can't be forced into it. Similarly, one can choose whether to found a family. The right to own property. Everyone has the right to own things, on their own or with others. No one has the right to take them away from you illegally. Freedom of religion or belief. Everyone has the right to choose their religion, express it, and follow it. Everyone has the right to change their religion or beliefs. Freedom of expression. Everyone has the right to their own opinions and thoughts, and to express these freely, so long as it is not in violation of, that is, breaking, other human rights. Freedom of assembly. Everyone has the right to organize and gather in peaceful meetings. No one can be forced to belong to an organization. Right to work. Everyone has the right to work in fair conditions and is free to choose their work with a fair wage that allows them to live and support family. Everyone should receive equal pay for equal work. Right to adequate standard of living. Everyone has the right to a standard of living that's enough, so they and their family have food, clothing, and housing. They should be able to access medical care when needed. Right to education. Everyone has the right to free primary school education and then to have access to continue studies as far as they wish. As you look at these human rights, does anything surprise you? Perhaps some surprise you because you always thought those were rights that were there anyway. So the Declaration of Human Rights was adopted on the 10th of December 1948. So the world celebrates Human Rights Day on the 10th of December each year. So why do we have a different date in South Africa? Let's go back to 1960 in South Africa. The UN has adopted the Declaration of Human Rights, but this is not being followed by the South African government at the time. The apartheid system was a system in South Africa whereby people were treated differently because of their race. Everyone was classified by their skin colour into one of four groups: white, black, coloured, or Indian, and then were referred to as white or non-white. The government was white, and they did not treat non-whites as equals. Non-whites were not allowed to live in the same communities as white people. They couldn't get the same education, and they were treated unfairly. A curfew was in place. That is a time by which everyone who was non-white had to be back home. Non-whites also had to carry a dompas or passbook around with them all the time, like an identity document. This passbook had information about them and whether they worked, and was used like a passport to prevent them from travelling to places where they were not allowed. As you can imagine, this caused much anger, frustration, and pain for the non-white South Africans, and many would protest when they could, but lived in the fear of unfair arrest or punishment. In March 1960, a group called the Pan-African Congress, PAC, organised what was meant to be a peaceful protest in the black township of Sharpeville. The protesters would march peacefully to the local police station without their passbooks, and then ask the police to arrest them as they were meant to carry their dompas with them. By the early afternoon, there was a crowd of around 5,000 people and 300 armed police lined up on armoured vehicles facing them. There is an account of a policeman accidentally being knocked over and a small scuffle then following, and then a police officer panicking and opening fire on the crowd. This led to the police all firing at the crowd for 2 minutes, and as the crowd turned and ran away, 69 people were shot in the back and killed, and a further 180 people injured. When we celebrate Human Rights Day on the 21st of March in South Africa, it is in memory of those who died in Sharpeville that day. As we hear of moments like this in history, we have an emotional response. I wonder what you're feeling right now. Perhaps you feel broken, upset, and hurting. Or maybe your emotions are of care and compassion for those who suffered. You might feel mad, angry, and confused. It might feel a bit traumatic or remind you of other traumas. Or perhaps you feel a mix of these emotions and have many questions that you want to ask, to find out more, to understand, to try and figure out how something like this could happen. Whatever you are feeling, name that feeling to yourself in your mind. Acknowledge it. The world has a past. The world has a present, right here, right now. And the world has a future. You can't change the past, however much we may sometimes wish we could, but we can change the future. It starts with us, here in the present, deciding how we are going to live and what we want the future to look like. As we celebrate any public holiday that is born out of an historical event, there are three things we can do. The three C's: commemorate, celebrate, and cultivate. To commemorate means to recall or remember something and pay respect to it. And so on Human Rights Day in South Africa, we commemorate those who lost their lives at Sharpeville and those who lost their loved ones. Then to celebrate, we celebrate that we have a Declaration of Human Rights, and that although there are still wrong things happening in the world, there are laws that mean things can be brought to justice, and an agreement that everyone should be treated fairly and have value and choice. And then we cultivate. The word cultivate is used when we talk about preparing soil for planting seeds or tending plants as they're growing. We can use it to talk about developing something or encouraging something. On Human Rights Day, let's think about what we can cultivate, what we can grow that will bring more justice in our world.